Good morning, fans, and welcome to our newest episode of Studio Jake. Today I have a very special guest. We have Laura Bush, who is not the former First Lady of the United States, but she does have a very similar name. She is the author of the book Undercover Patriot, which talks about veterans, and she's also a huge veteran awareness person. She works with different organizations to help our veterans who are coming home from war, helping them get jobs and stuff. And so we're going to start out. Good morning, Laura. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Jacob. It's great to be here and learn and have fun together with your listeners.
So to get started, tell us a little bit about your book, Undercover Patriot. Is it fiction, nonfiction? What kind of book is it?
Sure, good question. This is 100% true story of my experiences as an undercover journalist. And what I did in 2006 was I infiltrated several anti-war groups as a citizen journalist to follow exactly what they were doing. And one of the groups, what they were doing was they were protesting outside of Walter Reed Army Medical Center, where thousands of wounded soldiers and sailors and Marines were there. So while I was following these anti-war groups and trying to understand what they were doing, I was also going inside and visiting soldiers individually with some friends, and just kind of got to know them as people, no real heavy agenda, but just found that they kind of needed a friend. They kind of needed some support in transitioning from being a soldier to now being wounded and returning to civilian life.
And how did that experience affect your outlook? Did you have some preconceived notions about veterans, and then after you said working with them and going undercover with them, or being an undercover journalist, did what shifted from before to after?
Well, I knew that the soldiers were hardworking people because before I started the Undercover Patriot, I was volunteering at a welcome rally
Hmm.
for wounded soldiers to basically counter the atmosphere that the protesters had kind of engaged with there. And it was really surprising to me that the soldiers did not want to draw a lot of attention to themselves. They didn't even want to have people use the word hero.
Hmm.
And we want to edify the soldiers, we want to encourage them. But a lot of people who were there felt like, well, how am I a hero if my guys are still downrange? I mean, there's still
Right.
people fighting overseas in places that you and I probably wouldn't think or wouldn't remember that there's still active forces serving. So really what they needed was a companion. And they really wanted someone who wasn't going to talk to them in these bullet points about a political agenda.
Hmm.
I think the people who were the anti-war protesters would talk a good talk about, let's have education benefits for veterans, let's have a VA healthcare system. But if you actually ask them questions, they didn't have a frame of reference because none of them had served. So
Right.
they might say something like, well, let's get them involved with our union, paying their dues. But they really didn't have a path or had engaged with veterans at all, which was something that I think a lot of people hear the rhetoric that, oh, maybe these folks, they're for the troops, but they're against the war. And that's not what I saw when I was there.
And how can just average everyday people, how can they get involved with helping raise awareness or with helping veterans directly?
Sure, that's a good question. I think one area that is filling in the gap right now is churches have an overwhelming ability to welcome a new veteran back into the community. Churches by nature are focused on looking at the whole person, not just as that person is a demographic. And I think churches can really be creative in connecting some of the older veterans of previous generations with veterans today. My husband is a disabled veteran, and I know that a lot of times he doesn't want to be in kind of the group therapy groups and things like that. But if it's a picnic at a church or it's a outreach with a group of men where everybody's going fishing together, we have a lot of that here in our town. I was just on the phone with some folks with Elizabeth City Hero Operations in North Carolina. They're planning a fishing trip, and a lot of these folks, they go out one on one with a guide. It's not a big concert. It's not a lot of hype, but just kind of people interacting in small groups, getting to know each other can really make a big difference.
That's really interesting. And on kind of like a one-on-one level, because I have several friends who are veterans, and they might talk about their training or maybe their leave time, but they very rarely talk about when they saw action. Understandably, how can you, as a friend, because you don't want to be too pushy, but you want to be a friend, so if you can kind of tell, oh, maybe right now they're dealing with something. How can you, on a one-on-one level, like help out your buddy or your relative or whoever? How can you, on a one-on-one level, be supportive of them and say, hey, I've got your back now that you're here at home?
That's right. I think, like you said before, just knowing what the safe questions are and things that we really don't talk about.
Mm-hmm.
I let the soldiers volunteer information about their injury. Before some people get the feeling that you're looking at them as just an injured person to be in a picture with them.
Right.
You saw that kind of a lot with celebrities who maybe had great intentions but weren't prepared to interact face to face with people at Walter Reed. And I would say offering information about yourself. And I was injured. I actually had a back injury the summer between high school and college. So I kind of understood like some of the braces or some of the physical therapy. And actually, a lot of that had improved since the time I was injured. So sometimes those are different ways to start the conversation. Or it's always great to talk about where you're from, what the food was like. People have great stories about basic training, usually the things that they did or didn't do or what they thought versus what it was really like. So there's something about that person in who they are that led them to the military. I
Right.
think most people, I can't speak for everyone, but a lot of people feel like they have a calling. So what is your purpose now? What are some things that you'd like to do now? I know there are probably 1.2 million, I may be off on the number exactly, but there are a lot of caregivers
Mm-hmm.
who are people who are age that are a wife, a friend, a brother, a sister, somebody who's taking care of a veteran who served after 9/11. So involving the family and caring for the caregivers is going to be really important because a lot of the new hunting and fishing trips with veterans groups really involve the family. So
Right.
people feel they have a way to kind of get out of the house and get out of the routine, if you will.
So, how can people find what are some good resources where people can go online or call? Where can they go to find places that help out veterans?
Freedom Alliance is an organization that was founded by Colonel Oliver North, and they typically go to different outdoor excursions and engage with the local people there. They have people who are trained volunteers, and there's also a group, Military Ministry, or I think it's called CRU now, but it's with Campus Crusade for Christ.
Oh,
And that helps equip churches to hold events or engage with veterans or host events specifically for them. And it's very easy to connect around common interests. A lot of people who are outdoors people that are small business minded, they want to come together and form their own kind of organic veterans group locally. And there's a lot of support for that. There's people coming up all over on Facebook that are organizing veterans groups, some of which are private based on where you serve that you have to ask to be in the group. And some of them are just for support, maybe of parents or there's one that my friend Elizabeth Fulgaro runs called Private Prayer Place for PTS and TBI, I believe. And it's all about connecting and making sure people know that they're not alone. That's the great thing about America is it's using Facebook, using social networking and local civic groups. You can usually find someone who has something in common with you and go from there.
wow, that's really cool. And I encourage all my viewers, all my listeners, all my followers, get involved, help out veterans. They serve so you didn't have to. So please get involved. Now I'm gonna shift a little bit, and I'm gonna ask you, uh, what are some of your, you know, I'm gonna kind of frame this pop culture segment. You've seen have you do you watch, you or your husband watch like a lot of like war films? Do you like American Sniper or Saving Private Ryan or any film like that?
Some of them you kind of have to be ready to see.
Right.
So there's kind of a time for that. I think Act of Valor was something that we watched together and had me in a lot of suspense because there's a scene that involves like human trafficking or the people are being deceived by the Islamic radicals.
Mm-hmm.
And that part was like really tough for me. But I think it was like we can raise awareness we can see kind of what the mentality is of how both groups are thinking and what they're doing at the same time. That's what the film was highlighting. So yeah, there were people that put themselves on the line in that film that people who are in the audience, maybe they can see and try to better understand.
That's very interesting because that's one thing I'm always curious about is, as far as realism goes, for people who see action, because a lot of times you watch movies and it's just gratuitous gore. It's not actually realistic. This is really what happens on the battlefield. This is really what soldiers go through, men and women in uniform. I've heard American Sniper, Saving Private Ryan. I've heard films like those are pretty realistic. Act of Valor. I heard that's a. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Act of Valor is very was I heard was because that's actually more like a documentary, right? Act of Valor. It actually didn't it actually follow real soldiers?
Kind of like on a mission. And I
Yeah.
think people can see the different roles. Like there's a man who's doing intelligence, who's interrogating someone. Um, that's a role in the military, right? A lot of people think it's just infantry, but there had to be someone in intelligence. There had to be communication. There was camaraderie. I don't want to give away the movie, but I know there maybe. So yeah, soldiers, there's like an unspeakable bond that you do see, like when they're in the helicopter before they're going on their mission. And I think that is something that captivated me when I was at Walter Reed, because it's like people weren't alone in the cafeteria. People were forming groups based on what they did together. And like the brotherhood there is very real. I don't think that the brotherhood is being hyped for entertainment. I think that when you're around soldiers, you really do see a different culture that as a civilian I can learn from, because a lot of times in different situations, I don't want to generalize, but a lot of people, it's like all about them, all about their ascent to the top. And the soldiers
Right.
have to work together. They don't want to be in a foxhole with someone who's self centered. They have to sacrifice and they do have compassion. I think when the protesters were trying to do things that were emotionally abusive to them, like
Mm-hmm.
asking them to recall if they hurt a child, you
Right.
saw the compassion that in war, so many things happen. There's casualties, and that was in the Act of Valor. There was a specific scene in there that I'm thinking of without giving away the movie. But you do, people are in the wrong place at the wrong time. And
Right.
that makes the situation real as opposed to these action stories on the news where it's just an opinion and no real fact to it.
That makes sense. So, where can people find your book, Undercover Patriot, and how can they connect with some of the organizations that you are involved with?
Sure. Yeah, the book is on Amazon, and the title is Undercover Patriot by Laura Bush Jenkins. And yeah, feel free to email me, undercoverpatriot2016 at gmail.com. Or on Facebook, my name is Laura Elizabeth Bush. And if you want to be connected, I can make some calls and maybe introduce you to some people who are a part of the community. And yeah, we want to know about you. What are your hobbies? How can you and your sphere of influence get involved? That's what this is all about, because people who are in the audience are going to reach people that I can't reach. Everybody has a different personality and way that they do things. But the key is that we don't want to have veterans feeling that they're returning in their home. They're sitting alone. They're, for legitimate reasons, they're concerned about leaving outside, what might
Right.
happen because I don't have a uniform on, right? You don't have a uniform. So the psychology behind that is I don't know who this person is. Are they safe? Or if I'm in a marketplace like they have in the movie Undercover or Act of Valor, yeah, what could happen? What could go next? But yeah, as long as we're friendly, as long as we're being genuine, we're not being putting people up for photo props or things like that. People are going to feel that we look at them as people and they're going to want to be involved and welcomed home.
And thank you so much for being with us, Laura. We appreciate your time. If you are interested, like she said, look her up on Facebook. Find her book on Amazon. Of course, be sure to like and share this video. Be sure to subscribe to Studio Jake. You can find me on Twitter at RealJacobAiry, and my blog is www.jacobairy.blog. And my book just came out, Cacophony. It's available on Amazon, so give that a look as well. Laura, thank you so much for being on. It was such a delight to hear you talk about advocacy for our brave men and women in uniform. Thank you so much.
Have a great afternoon.
You too. Bye. And we're out. Thank you so much, Laura. I really appreciate it. I love hearing what people are doing for our veterans. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Take care.